Hello, I'm Sarah McDonald, the host of Evenings on ABC Radio Sydney. Welcome to the launch of the City of Parramatta's Foundation Day mini documentary series supported by ABC Sydney. Get ready to immerse yourself in Parramatta's rich heritage with 5 short videos celebrating different aspects of the city's past and present. From food and pandemics to local legends, foundations and artists, it's going to be quite a ride. So sit back, relax and enjoy. And after you're done, you can tune into me on ABC Radio Sydney, 702 on your AM dial or via your Listen app. Bye for now.
Now, Chris, when you said meet me for lunch, I didn't think I'd end up in the middle of Parramatta River.
Yeah, well, we're going to try and catch lunch today.
Catch lunch?
Well, we're going to try.
What are we catching?
We're looking for burras.
Barra. What's barra?
It's a Darug word for eel.
Oh, right.
It's where the river gets its name from and the place itself. So Parramatta means place of the eels.
Right. Oh, I think I've seen one over here. I think I got a log.
I think you did.
So, Chris, tell me another way to catch eels.
Well,
Chris describes himself as an artist and teacher. He's a proud Darug man and he knows heaps of stuff like where to get a meal so fresh it's still squirming.
eels like to shelter in the hollow log.
Darug people have been enjoying great local food in Parramatta for 60,000 years.
And you're done.
And you're done.
Bush tucker can still be found right in the heart of the city. And Chris is just the person to help me find it.
So, Chris, this is kind of like the supermarket or convenience store for Darug people?
You could say that. There's a lot of food around if you know where to look. This here's lamandra. They're a very hardy plant. It's spiky matrush too.
Right.
See all these spikes on here?
Yes, yeah, thorns popping out everywhere.
When it gets older, they come out of these seed pods in there. Each pod's got about 2 grains in them. They're very small, so you need lots of them. If you get enough of those, they get crushed up. They'll mix them with honey and ant larvae sometimes. Make a paste and cook them on the coals. It's flatbread that you can take with you for weeks.
From the Darug to the very first white settlers, baffled and beguiled in this new land. The new folks set out to make this place as much like the place they came from. Governor Arthur Phillips set a challenge for new settlers to come to Parramatta and grow their own food to see if they can sustain themselves in the new colony.
In 1789, Australia was one gigantic experiment, and this place was the scene of Australia's first experiment farm. Now, people back then had to be creative, so they named this place Experiment Farm. If new settlers could make it here, then they could make it anywhere, and they were granted their own patch of land to run their own farming experiment. It was kind of like MasterChef, but for farming. Sadly, a tradition that no longer happens today. Oh, mulberries. Rosalind, what kind of stuff did people grow out in Parramatta?
There were things like wheat, barley, a little bit of oats, but then also vegetables, things like cabbage and potatoes.
If you don't mind me saying so, it sounds like it's a very carb-heavy diet. I don't know if you could get away with that today.
Probably not, no.
Tell me, were people sent to Parramatta because they were convicts?
Well, they came out here originally because when the colonial settlers first landed in Sydney Cove, they found that the soils were too sandy and they couldn't grow the crops that they had with them.
Yeah.
So they came out looking for better soil and landscape that was familiar to them. So when they came out to Parramatta, they thought, great, this is a perfect place for farming. But one of the things that they weren't aware of was that the land looked like that because it had been managed by the local Indigenous people.
I love that you could be stealing a loaf of bread and then be made to make a loaf of bread. And were convicts working in perpetuity for the colony?
No, so if you were able to serve out your sentence, you could then be gifted a plot of land, which would then allow you to set up your own farmstead and be your own independent farmer.
That's such a great deal. Steal something, get some land.
Yes, well, the land that they were gifting wasn't being given with consultation to the local Indigenous people,
Sure.
so it probably wasn't the most clear-cut of agreements.
Food is just one of the biggest draw cards of Parramatta today. From the South Asian hub of Harris Park to farmers markets and Parramatta CBD's Eat Street.
You can get any kind of food here. Asian, Middle Eastern, South Asian, African, Cuban. You can even get Scottish food. Amazing. So what's the best thing about food in Parramatta?
People come over here because they're getting like of each and every culture's food.
Name it, you have everything.
This is as authentic as it gets, as far as I'm concerned.
Hey! Hey, Chris.
Hey, well, look, I've found a perfect place to get some burra.
Eel.
Yep.
Let's go.
And here we are.
Oh.
Some of the best burra in Parramatta.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to call this one Jared Hayne and that one Fatty Vorton.
Maybe we swap. I'm a bit of a Jared fan. To the mighty eels.
To the mighty eels. Walking around Parramatta Park, people might not realise they're actually in the middle of a pharmacy as well. What are some of the simple medical remedies that the Dwyer people used?
The casuarina's inner bark, that can be ground up and put on your tooth if you've got a toothache.
Okay, what if I've got like a real big headache?
If it gets too bad, maybe do what I do.
What's that? Oh, what's that?
Paracetamol.
Oh,
And if pain persists, see your doctor.
thanks for that. You're right.
But traditional cures were not enough when the colonial settlers arrived in Australia. They brought diseases that couldn't be treated with local medicine, diseases that devastated the Indigenous population, killing many in the first few years of the colony. 130 years later, a deadly strain of the pneumonic influenza spread across the world from North Africa to Europe through mainly the troops fighting World War I. And when those troops came home, so did the influenza. It's a subject Michelle Goodman knows all about.
So Michelle, you put together an incredible exhibition and story about how Parramatta dealt with the pandemic. When did you put all this together?
Well, last year we realised it was the 100th anniversary, so we decided to delve into the archives here and pull together the stories.
You did this in 2019. What did you know that no one else knew?
It surprised me how little attention it was getting, actually.
How did Parramatta deal with the pandemic at that time?
It's remarkably similar to now.
Oh, really?
When you look at the documentation here, we had the government proclamation in the end of 1918. They then set up a influenza committee and then decided how they were going to provide for the community.
What else did they do during the pandemic?
They issued another proclamation which basically was what we would call lockdown. So all the public spaces closed, like cinemas and restaurants, etc. Use of public transport was limited. Hygiene, they started deep cleaning all the city. And then further down, masks, compulsory wearing of masks. And then there was also government relief issued, council-funded work programs for people who had lost their livelihood. So cinema workers, that type of thing.
It's just like JobKeeper.
Yeah, it's very, it's very job seeker.
Does it surprise you that those techniques from 100 years ago are being used today?
Not really, because when I worked with the Westmead medical virologists, they explained, oh no, it could happen tomorrow.
I love how Westmead were totally all over it.
And it was very unnerving that less than 6 months after the talk we were living through a pandemic very similar.
This once in a 100-year event is strangely on time.
Back then, Parramatta was a health centre of Sydney, with Parramatta's hospital serving the surrounding colony.
And the tradition continues. Here on the edges of Parramatta Park is Westmead Hospital, which has been the control centre of the earliest cases of COVID-19 in New South Wales. Tanya, can you tell me the role that Westmead Hospital has played during this pandemic?
Westmead was really crucial right at the beginning of the pandemic, because we were the hospital that was the designated quarantine hospital for New South Wales, and with a new disease that we didn't know very much about. And because very little was known about the virus, working with the Ministry of Health and our local health district, it came to pass that we were really the guinea pig hospital for working out how to best manage patients with the virus, to prevent its transmission, and then to educate other hospitals about how best to manage patients with this infection.
You must have incredible staff to handle that kind of pressure.
Well, I think it says we're pretty good, really. I think it's the commitment of the staff and the fact they were working 18 to 20 hours a day. Everybody was pitching in. It was just amazing. And yet they were scared. You know, we didn't know about the virus. People were worried about their families, but that didn't deter them. They still came to work. They still did what they needed to do.
Well, Tanya, thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome, Dan.
Can I have a hug?
Not today, Dan.
If all these people walking around is any indication, Parramatta is very much alive in the 2020s.
But because Parramatta was England's second colony on the continent, it's got a long history of dead people that's second to none.
I'm on my way to meet local historian Judith Dunn. She's promised to introduce me to a bunch of her friends. I couldn't help but notice from her email that they've all been dead for quite a long time. But I'm trying to be more open-minded these days. Friendship can take many forms. She told me to meet her at St John's Cemetery, home of the oldest marked graves in Australia. She said she'd be dressed up in 70s gear. I love a theme, so I did the same.
Judith, I love the outfit, but it doesn't look very 70s.
Well, it is 70s, but 1870s.
Oh, I must have misread the email. Here we are, dead centre of Parramatta. So Judith, tell us what's so great about Parramatta's cemeteries?
Parramatta cemeteries are absolutely fascinating because they're so old that sometimes there's no record except for the stones.
Wow, every headstone has a story.
Oh, the stories behind the headstones are super. I know which one pushed his wife into the fire, which one was the axe murderer.
Does this make you like the librarian or the Netflix of this cemetery?
I've been looking after all the Parramatta cemeteries for 30 years, so these are my friends.
Now, Judith, there are a lot of dead people here. Shouldn't we just get rid of this place and put up a block of flats?
This is the oldest cemetery in Australia. So vitally important that these stories are kept. And if you move the stones, the context is gone.
Judith, can we please go and meet some of your friends? Or as I like to call them, the dead set legends of Parramatta?
Certainly.
Let's go check them out. This doesn't look like a cemetery, Judith.
It's not, but I know a long cut.
Oh, right. Well, who are we meeting next?
Elizabeth Peasley.
Who is Elizabeth Peasley?
Fantastically strong pioneer woman.
Right.
Lots of enterprises, butcher shop, herd of cattle, a toll bar. And besides all that, she had 12 children.
12 kids in pioneer Parramatta. Oh my God.
But there's more.
What?
Mr. Peasley had 13.
13, right. Oh God, and that would have made for a bit of excitement.
It certainly did. During the christening of the 13th, Mrs. Peasley sailed down the aisle and beat him over the head with her parasol.
Okay, but why are we here at a golf course?
Because she ran the Fox Under the Hills Inn, and this is now Fox Hills Golf Club.
Wow, so this was her land?
It was.
Oh, amazing. You know, my favourite